The metal cage hummed with energy as Park Ji-ho sat cross-legged on the cold floor. He had been in this prison for 3 weeks now, ever since the aliens captured him on planet Kepler 442b. The walls around him were made of some strange blue metal that glowed softly in the dark. Outside his cage, 3 very different alien beings watched him through the transparent barrier. They spoke in their own languages, but the translation device in his ear let him understand every word they said. "Look at it," said Captain Velcor, his crystal body catching the light as he moved. He was tall and thin, made entirely of living crystal that changed colors when he talked. The human just sits there doing nothing. No technology, no advanced thinking, just sitting like a rock. Dr. Zixra clicked her mandibles together in what Ji-ho had learned was alien laughter. She looked like a giant praying mantis, but with 6 arms instead of 4. Her green exoskeleton was covered in strange symbols that glowed when she was excited. "I have studied this creature for days," she said in her clicking voice. "Its brain is so simple. It only thinks about basic things like food, water, and shelter." The third alien, Luminas, was the strangest of all. She was made of pure energy that took the shape of a tall woman, but her body flickered like fire. When she spoke, her voice sounded like music mixed with static. "Physical bodies are so limiting," she said, her energy form pulsing brighter. "This human is trapped by its meat and bones. We are so much more advanced." Ji-ho said nothing. He had learned it was better to listen and watch. These aliens thought they were smarter than him, and he was happy to let them think that. While they talked, he studied their movements, their technology, and their weaknesses. The ship they were on was huge. Ji-ho had seen parts of it when they moved him from room to room for their tests. It was called the Nexus Prime, and it belonged to something called the Galactic Council. The aliens used it to study primitive species from different planets. "Today is special," Captain Velcor announced, his crystal body turning a bright blue color. "The Galactic Council wants to see our research. We will show them how primitive this human really is." Dr. Zixra rubbed her hands together excitedly. "I have prepared many tests. We will demonstrate how useless human survival skills are compared to our technology." "This will be entertaining," Lumina said, her energy form dancing with excitement. They moved Ji-ho to a large room filled with strange machines and holographic displays. In the center of the room was a circular platform surrounded by cameras and sensors. Other aliens appeared as holograms around the room, members of the Galactic Council who wanted to watch the demonstration. One hologram showed a creature that looked like a giant squid with tentacles covered in eyes. Another was a being made of metal and wires. A third looked like a walking tree with silver bark. There were dozens of them, all waiting to see the primitive human perform. "Honored council members," Captain Velcor began, his voice formal and proud. "Today we will show you why humans are one of the most backward species in the galaxy. Watch as we demonstrate their crude survival methods." They placed Ji-ho in a simulation chamber that looked like a forest. The walls around him showed trees, rocks, and a small stream. It looked very real, but Ji-ho knew it was all fake. "Human," Dr. Zixra commanded, "you are lost in the wilderness. You have no food, no water, no shelter. Show us how you would survive." Ji-ho stood up slowly and looked around. He walked to where the fake stream was and knelt down. Even though it was just a hologram, the aliens had made it feel real. He cupped the water in his hands and pretended to drink. "See how primitive, Captain," Velcor announced to the council. "It drinks directly from the water source without any purification. We would simply use our molecular filters to remove all impurities instantly." Ji-ho ignored them and began gathering sticks and stones from around the fake forest. He arranged them in a small circle and began rubbing 2 sticks together to make fire. The alien audience made sounds of amazement and disgust. The squid-like council member spoke first. "It is trying to create combustion with friction? How inefficient." "We can create plasma fire with a simple thought," said the metal creature. "This stick rubbing is like watching a baby play with toys." "Doctor?" Zixra clicked her mandibles loudly. "Observe how long this takes. Our energy weapons can create instant heat. This human will waste valuable time and energy on this useless activity. But Jiho continued working patiently. After several minutes, smoke began to rise from the sticks. He gently blew on the tiny ember and added small pieces of dry grass he had collected. Soon, a small flame appeared. Finally, Lumina said with boredom in her musical voice. It took forever to make such a tiny fire. Our plasma generators could heat an entire city in seconds. Jiho used his fire to heat some water in a container made from large leaves. He found some berries and nuts in the simulation and tested them carefully before eating. He built a simple shelter using branches and leaves, tying them together with grass he had twisted into rope. Look at that pathetic shelter. Captain Velcor laughed. Our force field generators can create perfect environmental protection instantly. This human builds with sticks like a primitive animal. The council members agreed with loud voices. They spoke about humans being evolutionary dead ends and technological infants. They discussed how human worlds should remain under alien supervision because humans were too primitive to govern themselves. Through it all, Jiho worked quietly and efficiently. He noticed things the aliens missed. Their energy weapons drained power quickly. Their force field generators needed constant maintenance. Their molecular filters broke down if the water was too dirty. Their plasma fire burned out fast without fuel, but Jiho's fire kept burning. His shelter stayed strong. His simple tools worked without any power source. His methods were slow, but they were reliable. This concludes our demonstration, Captain Velcor announced proudly. As you can see, human survival methods are crude, inefficient, and completely unnecessary in our advanced civilization. Indeed, agreed the squid-like council member. Humans are clearly not ready for full membership in the galactic community. They should remain as subjects for study. The other council members agreed. The holograms began to fade as the meeting ended. Dr. Zixra and Luminas congratulated each other on their successful presentation, but Jiho had been watching something else during the demonstration. In the corner of the room, a strange machine had been making unusual sounds. Its lights were flashing in patterns that didn't look normal. The aliens were so busy mocking him that they hadn't noticed their own equipment was having problems. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed everywhere. The artificial gravity flickered, making everyone stumble. What is happening? Captain Velcor demanded, his crystal body turning bright red with alarm. The wormhole generator, Dr. Zixra shouted, reading data from her instruments. It's overloading. The quantum field is destabilizing. Impossible, Lumina said, her energy form flickering wildly. Our technology is perfect, it cannot fail. But the ship began shaking violently. Through the windows, Jiho saw space itself bending and twisting around them. Stars stretched into long lines of light. The ship was being pulled into some kind of space tunnel, spinning out of control. The aliens ran around in panic, pushing buttons and shouting commands at their computers. But their advanced technology wasn't responding. The ship's systems were failing one by one. Jiho remained calm. He had been in dangerous situations before during his time in the Korean Special Forces. While the aliens panicked, he studied the ship's layout and looked for emergency supplies. The last thing he heard before everything went black was Captain Velcor screaming, "We're going to crash!" Then the ship hit something solid, and the world exploded into darkness. When Jiho woke up, he was no longer the primitive specimen in a cage. He was about to become their only hope for survival. Jiho woke up to the sound of hissing gas and sparking wires. His head hurt, and there was blood on his forehead, but he was alive. The ship's emergency lights cast red shadows everywhere, and smoke filled the air. He pulled himself up from the twisted metal floor and looked around. The Nexus Prime was completely destroyed. Half of the ship was buried in dark soil, and the other half was crushed against massive black rocks. Through the broken windows, Jiho could see an alien sky filled with strange purple clouds. "Help! Help me!" came a weak voice nearby. Jiho found Captain Velcor trapped under a fallen beam. The alien's crystal body was cracked in several places and clear fluid leaked from the wounds like blood. His once bright blue color had faded to a dull gray. Human, Velcor gasped. You must help me. I am damaged. Jiho studied the beam. It was too heavy for him to lift alone, but he found a piece of metal pipe nearby. Using it as a lever, he managed to lift the beam enough for Velcor to crawl out. Thank you, the alien captain whispered, then immediately tried to stand up straight. Now we must assess our situation and contact the Galactic Council for rescue. Jiho said nothing. He was already looking around, taking in their surroundings. The air smelled strange, sharp and metallic. The sky was the wrong color, and something felt dangerous about this place. Dr. Zixra emerged from the wreckage, clicking her mandibles in distress. 2 of her 6 arms were bent at wrong angles, and her green exoskeleton had several deep cracks. The communication array is destroyed, she reported. The computers are not responding. Most of our equipment is offline. Lumina's appeared next, but she looked very different. Instead of her usual bright, dancing energy form, she flickered weakly like a dying light. Bulb! I cannot maintain proper cohesion, she said, her musical voice now crackling like a broken radio. This planet's electromagnetic field is interfering with my energy matrix. Captain Velcor tried to activate his wrist communicator, but nothing happened. He pressed buttons on several other devices, but they were all dead. This is impossible, he muttered. Our technology is superior, it should work anywhere. The crash damaged everything, Dr. Zixra said, checking her instruments. But I can repair the systems. My analytical capabilities are still functional. Jiho stepped outside the crashed ship to examine their situation. The planet was unlike anything he had seen before. The ground was covered in black sand that seemed to absorb light. Strange trees with silver bark and no leaves grew in twisted shapes. The air tasted bitter, and every breath made his throat burn slightly. In the distance, he could hear sounds that were definitely not friendly. Low growls and high-pitched shrieks that made his skin crawl. We need to move, Jiho said when he returned to the others. This place is dangerous. Move? Captain Velcor laughed, though his crystal body flickered weakly. We are advanced beings. We do not run from primitive planets. We will stay here and repair our ship. The atmospheric composition is toxic, Dr. Zixra announced, reading from a handheld scanner that still worked. High levels of sulfur compounds and acidic particles. Our life support systems are failing. As if to prove her point, a light rain began to fall. Where the drops hit the ship's metal hull, they hissed and left small burn marks. Acid rain, Jiho said simply. He had already noticed the way the local plants had tough, waxy surfaces that would resist corrosion. We need shelter. Our force field generators will protect us, Lumina said, but when she tried to activate them, nothing happened. Her energy form flickered more weakly. I cannot access the power systems. Jiho was already working. He had found a large piece of the ship's hull that was curved like a bowl. Using some cables and support beams from the wreckage, he began building a lean-to shelter against the side of a large rock formation. What are you doing? Captain Velcor demanded. That primitive construction will not protect us from this planet's dangers. It will keep the acid rain off us, Jiho replied, continuing his work. Your skin is already being damaged. Indeed, where the rain had touched Velcor's crystal body, small pits were forming. The alien looked down at himself in horror. Dr. Zixra was having her own problems. Her exoskeleton was designed for controlled environments, and the planet's humidity was making her breathing slits clog up. She was making wheezing sounds with each breath. I need filtered air, she gasped. My respiratory system cannot process these atmospheric conditions. Jiho had anticipated this. He had torn cloth from the ship's interior and was now tying it over a frame he had built. Breathe through this, he told her. It will filter out some of the particles. That crude fabric cannot replace our advanced filtration systems, she protested, but she was desperate enough to try it. To her surprise, it helped. Lumina's was in the worst shape. Her energy form was slowly dispersing into the planet's chaotic, Electromagnetic field. She was losing coherence, becoming more transparent with each passing hour. "I am dying," she whispered, her voice now barely audible. "My energy matrix is unraveling. I need a containment field immediately." The aliens tried, for hours, to get their technology working. They pressed buttons, connected wires, and spoke technical terms that Jiho didn't understand. But nothing worked. Their advanced systems were completely dead. Meanwhile, Jiho had been busy. He had reinforced their shelter, collected rainwater in containers he had fashioned from debris, and built a small fire using materials from the ship and dry wood he had found under the rock overhang. "Fire will not help us," Captain Velikor said dismissively. "We need our energy systems restored." But as the day wore on, the temperature began to drop rapidly. The purple clouds grew thicker, and a cold wind began to blow. The aliens, who were used to perfectly controlled ship environments, began to shiver. Velkor's crystal body was turning darker as the cold affected his internal structure. Dr. Zixra's movements became slower and more sluggish. Luminous was barely visible now, just a faint glow that flickered weakly. "The fire actually generates useful thermal energy," Dr. Zixra admitted reluctantly, moving closer to Jiho's small campfire. "It is not entirely useless." Night fell quickly on the alien planet. The purple sky turned black and strange sounds echoed in the darkness. Jiho heard things moving in the shadows, things with claws that scraped against rocks and voices that howled in the distance. The aliens huddled, together in the shelter Jiho had built, finally understanding that their technology would not save them here. The fire was the only light in the darkness, and its warmth was the only thing keeping them alive. "This is just temporary," Captain Velikor said, his voice much quieter now. "Tomorrow, we will fix our systems and call for rescue." "Of course," Dr. Zixra agreed, but her clicking voice sounded uncertain. "Our superior intellect will solve this problem." Lumina said nothing. She was too weak to speak, using all her remaining energy just to maintain her basic form. Jiho added more fuel to the fire and settled down to keep watch. He had been in survival situations before, and he knew the truth that the aliens were not ready to accept yet. Their technology was useless here. Their advanced knowledge meant nothing on this hostile world. For the first time in their lives, these superior beings were completely dependent on the primitive human they had been mocking just hours earlier. As the night grew colder and the sounds in the darkness grew closer, Jiho realized that keeping these aliens alive was going to be the hardest mission of his life. But he was not going to let them die, not even after everything they had said about humans being inferior. Tomorrow, the real survival test would begin. The sun on this alien world rose like a pale orange disk through the purple clouds. Jiho had stayed awake all night, keeping the fire burning and watching for dangers in the darkness. The aliens had slept badly, shivering despite the warmth from his fire. Captain Velikor woke up first. His crystal body now had dozens of small cracks running through it like a broken window. The clear fluid that leaked from these wounds had dried into crusty patches on his skin. "Status report," he commanded, weakly, trying to sound like he was still in charge. "Have our systems come back online?" Dr. Zixra checked her instruments, but the screens remained dark. "Nothing is working, Captain. The electromagnetic interference from this planet is too strong. Our quantum processors cannot function here." Luminous was barely visible now, just a faint outline of flickering light. When she tried to speak, her voice came out as static and whispers. "Energy. Losing. Cannot maintain." Jiho had been exploring the area around their crash site since dawn. He returned carrying several items he had found: strange fruits that looked safe to eat, roots that might be edible, and materials for improving their shelter. "Food," he said simply, placing the fruits near the fire. "We need to eat." "Our nutritional synthesizers will provide proper sustenance," Captain Velikor said. But when he tried to activate the food machines from the ship, nothing happened. The power systems were completely dead. Dr. Zixra examined the alien fruits with her analytical equipment, but the scanners would not turn on. I cannot determine if these are safe for consumption, she announced. My chemical analysis tools are non-functional. Then we starve, Captain Velcor said with finality. We cannot risk eating unknown substances. But Jiho was already cutting one of the fruits open with a sharp piece of metal from the ship. He examined the inside carefully, smelled it, and touched a tiny piece to his tongue. He waited several minutes, then took a small bite. After waiting longer, he ate more. The human is poisoning itself, Dr. Zixra observed with scientific interest. This is natural selection in action. But Jiho did not get sick. Instead, he began preparing the fruits, removing parts that looked dangerous and cutting the rest into pieces. He cooked some over the fire and left others raw. Hours passed. Jiho remained healthy while the aliens grew weaker. Captain Velcor's crystal body was becoming more damaged as dehydration affected his internal structure. Dr. Zixra's breathing was getting worse, and her movements were slow and painful. Perhaps, Dr. Zixra said quietly, we could try a small sample of the human's food, for scientific purposes only. The cooked fruit was sweet and filling. To their surprise, it gave them energy and made them feel better. But they refused to admit that Jiho's primitive food testing had worked. Lucky guess, Captain Velcor muttered, eating more of the fruit. The real crisis came on the third day. Dr. Zixra had wandered away from their shelter to look for salvageable technology. She walked into what looked like an empty clearing, but the ground was covered with thin vines that looked like ordinary grass. Suddenly, the vines came alive. They wrapped around her legs and started pulling her toward a large plant with a mouthful of sharp thorns. The plant had been hiding underground, waiting for prey to step on its vine network. Dr. Zixra screamed, her mandibles clicking in terror. Help! The vegetation is carnivorous. It is attempting to consume me. Captain Velcor tried to use his energy weapons to cut the vines, but his equipment was still dead. He pulled at the vines with his hands, but his cracked crystal body was too weak. Luminous tried to help, but she could barely maintain her form. Her energy attacks flickered uselessly and had no effect on the plant. The vines were pulling Dr. Zixra closer to the thorny mouth. She was fighting hard, but the plant was stronger. In minutes, she would be eaten alive. That was when Jiho acted. He had been watching the plant carefully. He noticed that it reacted to movement and electrical signals from their alien technology. But it seemed confused by smoke and fire. Jiho quickly gathered green leaves and wet wood. He threw them on his campfire, creating thick white smoke. Then he used a burning branch as a torch and ran toward the carnivorous plant. The smoke confused the plant's senses. It could not tell where its prey was anymore. The fire made it recoil, loosening its grip on Dr. Zixra's legs. Do not move, Jiho told her calmly. Stay very still. He used the burning torch to carefully burn through the vines, holding her, one by one. The plant thrashed around, trying to find them, but the smoke made it blind and confused. Within minutes, Dr. Zixra was free. They ran back to their shelter, and the plant did not follow. It was designed to catch prey in its vine network, not to hunt actively. Dr. Zixra was shaking with fear and shock. It nearly consumed me, she whispered. My analytical methods were useless. The creature did not match any known biological patterns. How did you know what to do? Captain Velcor asked Jiho, his crystal body flickering with confusion. Your primitive brain should not have been able to solve such a complex problem. The plant hunts by sensing movement and electrical signals, Jiho explained simply. Smoke confuses its senses. Fire makes it afraid. Basic survival knowledge. Impossible, Dr. Zixra protested. That would require understanding complex biological interactions without proper analysis equipment. But the proof was clear. Jiho's primitive methods had worked when their advanced technology had failed. He had saved Dr. Zixra's life using nothing but observation, fire, and smoke. That evening, the aliens were much quieter than usual. They sat around Jiho's fire, eating the food he had prepared, sheltered by the lean-to he had built. Their superior technology lay around them in Useless piles of broken metal and dead circuits. The humans' methods are interesting, Dr. Zixra admitted reluctantly. Perhaps there is some value in these primitive techniques. It is still inferior to proper technology, Captain Velcor insisted, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Once we repair our systems, we will not need these crude methods. Lumina said nothing. She was too weak to argue, and they all knew she was slowly dying. Her energy form was dispersing more every day. That night, Jiho made a difficult decision. He had been watching Lumina's fade away, and he had an idea that might help her, but it would require the aliens to trust him completely. I think I can help you, he told Luminous, but you will have to let me touch your energy form. Impossible, Captain Velcor said immediately. Physical contact with a pure energy being would kill any organic creature. Your primitive body cannot interact with advanced energy matrices, Dr. Zixra agreed. It would be destroyed instantly. But Luminous was desperate. She was losing coherence rapidly, and nothing else was working. What? What do you propose? She whispered. Jiho had been thinking about human meditation techniques he had learned in the military. In my culture, we have methods for controlling energy in the body. Breathing exercises, mental focus. Maybe I can help you focus your energy instead of letting it scatter. Ridiculous, Captain Velcor scoffed. Primitive mental exercises cannot affect quantum energy fields. But Luminous was willing to try anything. Slowly, carefully, she extended a tendril of her energy toward Jiho's outstretched hand. To everyone's surprise, including Jiho's, the energy did not hurt him. Instead, it felt warm and tingly, like a mild electrical current. Using breathing techniques he had learned for staying calm under stress, Jiho helped guide Luminous' scattered energy back into a more stable pattern. It worked. Her form became brighter and more solid. She was still weak, but she was no longer dispersing. How is this possible? Dr. Zixra demanded, her instruments unable to explain what they were seeing. I do not know, Jiho admitted honestly. Sometimes, things work even when we do not understand why. The alien stared at him in silence. Their advanced science could not explain what had just happened. Their superior technology had failed them completely, but this primitive human had solved problems they could not even analyze. For the first time since the crash, Captain Velcor's crystal body showed colors of uncertainty instead of confidence. Dr. Zixra's mandibles clicked nervously as she tried to process information that did not fit her analytical models, and Luminous, now stable enough to speak clearly, said something that shocked them all. Perhaps we have been wrong about humans. The admission hung in the air like smoke from Jiho's fire. None of them wanted to say it out loud, but they were all thinking the same thing. Maybe the primitive human was not so primitive after all. Maybe they needed him more than he needed them. 2 weeks had passed since the crash. The aliens were still alive, but barely. Captain Velcor's crystal body was now covered in so many cracks that he looked like a broken statue held together by willpower. Dr. Zixra wheezed with every breath, and her green exoskeleton had turned a sickly yellow color. Luminous was stronger than before thanks to Jiho's help, but she still flickered like a candle in the wind. Jiho had been studying the sky for days. The purple clouds were getting thicker and darker. The wind was changing direction, and the air pressure felt different. He had learned to read weather signs during his military training, and all the signs pointed to one thing. A massive storm was coming. We have to move, he told the aliens as they sat around their morning fire. Big storm coming. This shelter won't protect us. Captain Velcor looked up at the sky with his cracked, crystal eyes. I see no evidence of severe weather patterns. The atmospheric conditions appear stable. Your weather sensors are broken, Jiho replied simply. Look at the clouds. Feel the wind. The animals are all hiding. It was true. For the past 2 days, the strange creatures that usually made noise in the distance had gone completely silent. Even the carnivorous plants had pulled their vines underground. Animals do not possess meteorological knowledge, Dr. Zixra protested, though her voice was weaker than usual. They cannot predict weather patterns with scientific accuracy. But Jiho was already packing supplies. He had made bags from pieces of the ship's fabric and was filling them with food, water, and tools. We need to reach higher ground. There are caves in those hills. He pointed to a range of rocky hills about 5 miles away. They looked dangerous and difficult to climb, especially for the injured aliens. Impossible, Captain Velcor declared. We cannot travel that distance in our current condition. We will remain here and wait for rescue. No rescue is coming, Jiho said bluntly. Your emergency beacon is broken. We're on our own. The truth of his words hit them hard. They had been hoping for weeks that someone would find them, but no ships had appeared in the alien sky. They were truly stranded. Even if we must relocate, Dr. Zixra said, that terrain is too challenging. My damaged exoskeleton cannot handle such a journey. Jiho studied each of them carefully. Then he began making modifications to their equipment and clothing, using materials from the ship. For Captain Velcor, he created a support harness using cables and metal strips. The harness would hold the alien's cracked body together and make walking easier. Your crystal structure can be reinforced, Jiho explained, like putting a cast on a broken bone. For Dr. Zixra, he made a breathing apparatus using cloth filters and a small air pump he had salvaged from the ship. This will help your lungs work better during the journey. For Lumina's, he created a containment field using the ship's emergency power cells and some magnetic coils. It was crude compared to alien technology, but it would help her maintain her energy form during travel. These primitive modifications cannot replace proper medical equipment. Dr. Zixra protested, but she put on the breathing apparatus anyway. To her surprise, it made breathing much easier. Captain Velcor was more stubborn. I do not need assistance from human contraptions, he said proudly. But when he tried to stand without the harness, his crystal body nearly fell apart. Reluctantly, he allowed Jiho to fit the support system around him. The storm hit just as they were finishing their preparations. It came suddenly and violently, with winds that howled like living creatures and rain that burned like acid. Their shelter was destroyed in minutes, torn apart by the fierce wind. Move now, Jiho shouted over the storm noise. Stay close together. The journey was a nightmare. The wind tried to knock them down with every step. The acid rain burned their skin and ate through their clothes. Lightning struck the ground around them, leaving smoking craters in the black. Sand, Captain Velcor stumbled and fell repeatedly, but Jiho's harness kept his crystal body from shattering completely. I cannot continue, he gasped after the 10th fall. Leave me here. No one gets left behind, Jiho said firmly. He helped the alien captain to his feet and showed him how to use the walking stick he had made. Lean on this. Take smaller steps. Dr. Zixra was having trouble with the rough terrain. Her 6 legs were designed for smooth surfaces, not rocky ground covered in slippery mud. She kept slipping and sliding, unable to get good grip. Jiho showed her how to distribute her weight differently. Don't fight the ground, he explained. Work with it, feel where it's solid. This goes against all my analytical models of efficient locomotion, she protested, but she tried his method. Slowly she began to understand how to read the terrain with her feet instead of her instruments. Lumina's had her own problems. The storm's electromagnetic interference was disrupting Jiho's crude containment field. She was losing coherence again, her energy form spreading out like mist in the wind. Focus on my voice, Jiho told her, remembering the meditation techniques that had helped before. Don't think about the storm. Think about staying together. Think about moving forward. Somehow it worked. Luminous pulled her scattered energy back together and continued moving. The worst part of the journey came when they had to cross a deep ravine. A river of acid water rushed through the bottom, and the only way across was a fallen tree that formed a natural bridge. We cannot cross that, Captain Velcor said, looking at the narrow, slippery log. It is too dangerous. The alternative is going around, Jiho replied, which adds 6 hours to our journey. We don't have that much time before the worst of the storm hits. He studied the fallen tree carefully. It was thick enough to walk on, but the bark was wet and slippery from the acid rain. One wrong step would mean falling into the corrosive river below. Jiho had an idea. He took rope he had made from plant fibers and tied it securely to both sides of the ravine. Then he showed the aliens how to use the rope as a safety line while crossing the log. "This is primitive rope making," Dr. Zixra observed. "It cannot support our weight if we fall." "It's not meant to support your full weight," Jiho explained patiently. "It's meant to help you balance and catch you if you slip. Trust the rope, but don't depend on it completely." One by one, they crossed the dangerous bridge. Captain Velcor went first, moving slowly and carefully with Jiho's harness supporting his damaged body. Dr. Zixra followed, using the balance techniques Jiho had taught her. Luminous floated across, using the rope as a guide to keep her energy form focused. Jiho went last, making sure everyone was safe before crossing himself. By the time they reached the caves, all of them were exhausted and hurt, but they were alive, and they were together. The cave Jiho had chosen was deep and dry with multiple chambers that would provide good shelter. He quickly built a fire near the entrance, and the warm light drove away the cold and darkness. As they sat around the fire, catching their breath and treating their injuries, something had changed between them. The aliens no longer looked at Jiho as a primitive specimen. They looked at him as the person who had saved their lives. "Your rope techniques were effective," Dr. Zixra admitted quietly. "I have never encountered such methods in my scientific studies." "The support harness you created for me is ingenious," Captain Velcor added, his crystal body glowing warmer colors than before. "It uses basic engineering principles, but applies them in ways our advanced systems cannot replicate." Luminous simply said thank you, but their ordeal was far from over. Through the cave entrance, they could see the storm growing worse. Lightning lit up the sky constantly, and the wind sounded like screaming monsters. "How long will this storm last?" Captain Velcor asked. Jiho studied the lightning patterns and listened to the wind. 3 days, maybe 4, but that's not our biggest problem." "What do you mean?" Dr. Zixra asked nervously. Jiho pointed to tracks he had found near the cave entrance, large paw prints with claw marks that were definitely not friendly. "We're not alone up here," he said quietly. "Something big lives in these caves, and the storm is going to trap us in here with it." Outside, thunder crashed like the end of the world, and somewhere deep in the cave system, something howled in response. The aliens looked at Jiho with new understanding. They had accepted him as their leader during the journey, but now they realized something more important. Their survival didn't just depend on his knowledge. It depended on trusting him completely, even when his method seemed impossible to understand. Sakir. Real test of their alliance was about to begin. 3 months had passed since the crash. The cave system had become their home, and the 4 survivors had learned to work together like a well-trained team. Captain Velcor's crystal body had healed stronger than before, with the cracks forming, beautiful patterns that actually made him more flexible. Dr. Zixra had adapted to breathing the planet's air naturally, and her exoskeleton had grown thicker to protect against the environment. Luminous had learned to maintain her energy form without technology, using the meditation techniques Jiho had taught her. But their biggest challenge was still ahead of them. Jiho stood at the edge of a cliff, looking up at the highest mountain peak on the planet. Somewhere up there was an old emergency beacon from a previous crash, another ship that had been destroyed years ago. If they could reach it and get it working, they might be able to send a distress signal that would reach space. "The journey will take 2 weeks," Jiho told the others as they studied the mountain. "It's dangerous. The air gets thinner as we go higher. The temperature drops below freezing, and there are things up there that we haven't seen before." Captain Velcor looked at the steep rocky slopes covered in ice and snow. "My crystal structure may not handle the extreme cold," he admitted. "And if I shatter at that altitude, there will be no way to repair me. My exoskeleton becomes brittle in freezing temperatures," Dr. Zixra added. "I could become completely immobilized. I lose energy coherence in cold environments," Luminous said quietly. "I might disperse permanently." They all looked at Jiho, waiting for his decision. Over the months, He had become their undisputed leader. They trusted his judgment completely now. "We go together," Jiho said simply. "We've come this far as a team. We finish as a team." The climb began at dawn. Jiho had spent weeks preparing equipment for each of them. He had made insulated clothing from materials salvaged from both their crashed ship and the ancient wreckage they had found in the caves. For Captain Velkor, he had created a warming system using chemical heating pads. For Dr. Zixra, he had built flexible joint protectors to prevent her exoskeleton from cracking. For Luminas, he had designed a portable containment field powered by hand-cranked generators. "These crude modifications cannot replace proper environmental suits," Dr. Zixra said, but she put on the gear anyway. She had learned to trust Jiho's inventions. The first day of climbing was hard, but manageable. They followed paths that Jiho had scouted, avoiding the most dangerous areas. They moved slowly, stopping frequently to rest and check on each other. But on the second day, they encountered their first real danger. A pack of creatures that looked like giant wolves made of living ice had been following them. These were the mountain predators that Jiho had worried about, intelligent hunters that worked together to trap prey on narrow ledges. 6 of them, Jiho counted, watching the ice wolves position themselves above and below their position on the mountain path. "They're trying to surround us." "Our energy weapons are still non-functional," Captain Velkor reported. "How do we defend ourselves?" Jiho had been expecting this. He had prepared for it during their months in the caves. "We don't fight them," he said. "We confuse them." He pulled out several small devices he had built from scrap metal and chemical compounds. When activated, they produced bright flashes of light and loud, disorienting sounds. The ice wolves relied on their keen senses to hunt, but the sensory overload from Jiho's homemade flashbangs confused and frightened them. While the predators were disoriented, the group moved quickly along the mountain path to safety. The wolves, unable to coordinate their attack, eventually gave up and left to find easier prey. "Brilliant tactical thinking," Captain Velkor said with genuine admiration. "You turned their superior senses into a weakness." "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones," Jiho replied. They climbed for 10 more days, facing storms, avalanches, and equipment failures. Each challenge brought them closer together as a team. Captain Velkor learned to use his crystal, body's unique properties, to find safe paths through unstable ice. Dr. Zixra used her analytical mind to calculate the safest routes up the mountain face. Luminous used her energy form to scout ahead and warn them of dangers they couldn't see, and Jiho taught them all how to survive in conditions that would have killed them months ago. When they finally reached the emergency beacon, it was buried under years of ice and snow. The equipment was old and badly damaged, but some parts still worked. "I can repair the transmitter," Dr. Zixra said, examining the ancient technology. "But we will need a power source." "The quantum battery is dead," Captain Velkor reported, "and we have no way to recharge it." That was when Luminas made her contribution. "I can power it," she said simply. "I can transfer some of my energy directly into the system." "That's dangerous," Jiho warned. "You could lose too much energy and disperse completely." "You saved my life many times," Luminas replied. "Now I save all of us." It took hours of careful work, but they finally got the beacon working. The distress signal went out into space, carrying their location and a message asking for rescue. But they weren't done yet. As they prepared to make the dangerous journey back down the mountain, Jiho made a discovery that changed everything. The beacon had picked up another signal, an incoming message from a rescue fleet that was already on its way. But the message contained terrible news. A massive volcanic eruption was building deep underground, and it would soon make the entire planet uninhabitable. "The geological instability will trigger a planet-wide catastrophe," Dr. Zixra translated from the technical data. "We have less than 6 hours before the surface becomes completely toxic." "The rescue ships cannot reach us in time," Captain Velkor realized. "They are still 2 days away. They were trapped on a mountain peak with no way down in time to reach the rescue ships and no way to survive the coming volcanic disaster." That was when Jiho made the most important decision of his life. "There's a way," he said quietly. But it's dangerous for all of us. He had been studying the mountain's geology during their climb. There was a network of underground caves that connected to a river system. If they could reach the caves before the eruption, the underground waterways might carry them to safety. The caves are unstable, Dr. Zixra protested. We could be trapped underground when the eruption happens. Or we could ride the underground river to the other side of the continent, Jiho countered. Away from the volcanic zone. It was an insane plan. They would have to rappel down a 1,000-foot cliff face, navigate through flooded caves in complete darkness and hope that the underground river carried them to safety instead of drowning them. But it was their only chance. I trust you, Captain Velcor said simply. You have never led us wrong. Your survival instincts have kept us alive this long, Dr. Zixra agreed. We follow your lead. Wherever you go, we go, Luminas added. The descent was terrifying. They now rappelled down the cliff face as the ground began to shake with pre-eruption tremors. They reached the cave entrance just as the first volcanic gases began poisoning the air above. The underground journey was like a nightmare. They floated on makeshift rafts through pitch-black caves filled with rushing water. Rocks fell from the ceiling. Poisonous gases seeped through cracks in the stone. The water was freezing cold and moved so fast they could barely control their direction. But Jiho's plan worked. After hours of underground travel, they emerged from a cave opening on the far side of the continent, just as rescue ships appeared in the sky above. When the rescue team found them, they were exhausted, injured, but alive. All four of them had survived an impossible situation through teamwork, trust, and human ingenuity. As they were taken aboard the rescue ship, Captain Velcor, Dr. Zixra, and Luminas did something that shocked the other aliens in the rescue fleet. They formally requested that Jiho be granted full citizenship in the Galactic Council and given the rank of Chief Survival Instructor for all species. This human saved our lives repeatedly, Captain Velcor testified to the Council via hologram. His survival skills are not primitive, they are foundational. Every species in the galaxy could learn from his knowledge. Human intuition and adaptability exceed our analytical methods in survival situations, Dr. Zixra added. They deserve respect, not mockery. Humans are not inferior, Luminous concluded. They are different, and that difference makes them valuable. 6 months later, Jiho stood in the Galactic Survival Academy, teaching a class of young aliens from dozens of different species. He showed them how to make fire, build shelter, find water, and adapt to hostile environments using nothing but intelligence, determination, and basic tools. The aliens listened with respect and fascination, taking careful notes on techniques their advanced civilizations had forgotten or never learned. Remember, Jiho told his students at the end of each lesson, technology can fail, equipment can break, but knowledge, skills, and the will to survive, those are things no one can take away from you. And in the back of the classroom, Captain Velcor, Dr. Zixra, and Luminous watched with pride as their former prisoner became the teacher of the galaxy. The human they had once mocked as primitive had become the most respected survival expert in known space, and they were proud to call him their friend.